If you still believe that the problem with your financial life is earning too little, that belief might be exactly what's keeping you where you are. It's hard to hear, I know, but what if I told you that the way you think about money was programmed from an early age, and it wasn't programmed to make you rich, it was programmed to keep you safe, obedient, and many times stuck. Since childhood, you've heard phrases that shaped your perception without you even noticing. You grew up believing that money is hard to get, that investing is risky, and that becoming wealthy is only for a few people. At the same time, you were pushed into a system that teaches you to work, spend, and repeat this cycle for the rest of your life. And the most dangerous part? You start to believe that this is normal. But there's one detail almost nobody tells you. While you live inside this pattern, making automatic decisions every day, an invisible cycle is forming. A cycle where your beliefs shape your actions, and your actions confirm those same beliefs. And so, year after year, everything stays the same, even when you try to change. The good news is that this can be broken. And no, it has nothing to do with luck, talent, or making a lot of money. It has everything to do with understanding what's behind your decisions and learning to play a completely different game from the one you were taught. And once you start to see this, you'll never look at money the same way again. From an early age, without realizing it, you were being shaped, not by your own choice, but by the environment you grew up in. Phrases like, "money doesn't grow on trees," "rich people are dishonest," or "we weren't born for that," were repeated almost like absolute truths inside your home. And the interesting part is that no one there was trying to harm you. Quite the opposite. They were just passing on what they had learned. But without realizing it, this started to build your financial programming. Those phrases didn't stay only in your ears, they sank into your subconscious. Little by little, they shaped your financial mindset, creating limiting beliefs about money, wealth, and success. You may not even remember when you learned this, but you still feel the effects today. It's that strange feeling that getting rich seems distant, almost impossible, as if there's an invisible barrier between you and financial freedom, and somehow that feels normal. Then there's a point many people ignore: inherited financial fears. Maybe you saw your parents struggling, avoiding risks, always living on the edge. That taught you, without words, that money is scarce and that playing it safe is the best option. So when an opportunity shows up, like investing or starting a business, your instinct isn't to move forward, it's to step back. Not because you lack ability, but because of conditioning. In practice, this shows up in subtle ways. You might earn well but struggle to save. Or you think about investing but always postpone it, as if it's never the right time. Sometimes you prefer to stick with what's familiar, even if it keeps you stuck. And the most interesting part? It feels like a rational decision, but it's actually an automatic pattern running in the background based on everything you absorbed growing up. It's like trying to build wealth on a foundation that was programmed to avoid financial growth. You work hard, you try to improve your life, but something invisible keeps pulling you back to the same place. And when you start to realize this, one question becomes inevitable. What if the problem was never how much you earn, but what you were taught to believe? And that opens the door to something even deeper. If you stop and think about it, you'll realize you spent years inside a system that never taught you about financial education. On the contrary, you were taught to obey, follow rules, get good grades, and in the end, get a good job. But almost no one talked about how to build wealth, generate passive income, or achieve financial freedom. It's as if you were trained to work for money, not to make money work for you. During school, you learned math, language, history, but no one showed you how to invest, how to multiply your money, or how to escape the cycle of living only on a salary. And this is not by accident. The education system was designed to create good workers, not investors. In other words, you were prepared to be part of the game, but not to understand how the game actually works behind the scenes. In practice, this creates a dangerous pattern. You grow up believing that financial stability only comes from a fixed job, so you seek security, avoid risks, and distance yourself from anything that involves faster financial growth. For example, when you hear about stocks, real estate funds, or even entrepreneurship, your first reaction is often, "This is too complicated," or "This isn't for me." And once again, this didn't come from you, it was taught. And the most interesting part is that the more you follow this path without questioning it, the more trapped you become. You trade time for money, month after month, hoping that a raise or promotion will fix everything. But deep down, you realize that no matter how much more you earn, the pattern stays the same. Because the root of the problem is not income, it's the way you were conditioned to think about money and work. And when this realization starts to hit, a discomfort almost inevitably appears, because you understand it's not a lack of effort, it's a lack of direction. And if the system never taught you how to build wealth, then what else might be hidden inside the beliefs you still carry today? At some point in your life, without realizing it, you started to believe that money is hard to earn and easy to lose. This idea settles in silently, creating a scarcity mindset that influences almost all your financial decisions. You begin to see money as something limited, almost rare, and that completely changes how you act on a daily basis. When this mindset takes over, fear steps in. Fear of spending, fear of investing, fear of losing. And ironically, this fear doesn't protect you, it paralyzes you. You avoid opportunities that could generate financial growth precisely because you're focused on not making mistakes. It's like someone who, afraid of falling, decides never to learn how to ride a bike. It feels safe, but keeps you in the same place forever. In practice, this shows up in simple decisions. You might prefer to leave your money sitting in a savings account, even knowing there are better options like government bonds, fixed income investments, or real estate funds. Or you avoid learning about investing because you believe it's too complicated. Deep down, it's not a lack of ability, it's your financial mindset trying to protect you from a danger that often isn't even real. And here's an interesting detail. The more you believe money is scarce, the more you act as if it truly is. You limit yourself, play small, avoid thinking big, and that directly impacts your ability to generate extra income, invest, and build wealth. It's a silent cycle. You believe there's not enough, and without realizing it, you start creating that exact reality. But what most people don't realize is that scarcity is not in money itself, it's in the way you were conditioned to see it. And when that perception begins to change, something interesting happens. You start questioning not just money, but your place in this game. And that leads to an even deeper belief. At some point in your journey, you may have absorbed a silent but extremely powerful idea that wealth is only for a few people. It's not something someone necessarily told you directly, but it was there, between the lines, in the stories, in the examples around you. Wealthy people were always different, exceptional, or even too lucky. And without realizing it, you started excluding yourself from that group. This belief creates an invisible but very real limitation. Because deep down, if you believe that becoming wealthy isn't for you, your actions begin to reflect that. You don't pursue certain opportunities, you don't expose yourself to new paths, and often, you don't even try. It's as if there's an invisible ceiling telling you how far you can go, and anything beyond that feels too distant to even consider possible. In everyday life, this appears in subtle ways. You see someone succeeding with investments, business, or online income and think, that works for them, not for me. Or you believe you need a lot of money to start, when in reality there are accessible paths, like investing in ETFs, real estate funds, or even starting a small digital income stream. But as long as this belief is active, every path seems harder than it really is.
And the most interesting part is that this idea doesn't hold up in reality. It holds up through repetition. Because when you start paying closer attention, you notice ordinary people with simple backgrounds building wealth over time. People who started small, making mistakes, learning, but who didn't carry this limiting belief as strongly. That shows the problem isn't access, it's perception. And when you start to question this belief, something shifts. Because if wealth isn't only for a few, then why are you still playing as if it is? And that question opens the door to an even more automatic pattern, one that happens without you even noticing in your daily behavior.
Now we get into one of the most dangerous and at the same time most common patterns. You work, you put in effort, you go through stressful days, and almost like an automatic reflex, you feel like you deserve a reward. And then comes that classic phrase, "I deserve this." It might be a small purchase, some food delivery, something on installments, nothing that seems too serious on its own, but that's exactly where the pattern begins to form. The problem isn't the spending itself, it's the meaning you attach to it. When consumption becomes a way to relieve stress or seek immediate pleasure, it stops being a conscious choice and becomes emotional behavior. You're not buying because you need it, you're buying to feel something. And that creates a cycle where money becomes an escape valve, not a tool for building wealth. In practice, this may seem harmless. A coffee here, a sale there, a just today. But when you add up these small expenses over time, you realize they drain a significant portion of your income. Money that could be going toward investments, passive income, or building assets simply disappears. And the most interesting part? You rarely notice it in the moment it happens. And there's an important detail. This behavior is directly tied to your mindset, because if deep down you don't believe you can build long-term wealth, it makes sense to chase short-term pleasure. It's almost like thinking, since I'm not going to get rich anyway, I might as well enjoy now. And without realizing it, that reinforces the cycle of scarcity even more. But when you start paying closer attention to this pattern, something changes. You realize it's not a lack of money, it's a lack of intention in how you use it. And that leads to an uncomfortable question. How many financial decisions have you actually made consciously, and how many were just automatic? Because the next pattern goes even deeper into this. There's a silent pattern that holds many people back without them even realizing it: avoiding investments. Not because you don't want to grow financially, but because deep down, there's a fear of the unknown. Terms like stocks, real estate funds, passive income, or even financial education seem too complicated at first glance. And so, to avoid discomfort, you simply postpone it. I'll look into that later. But that later keeps repeating for months, sometimes years. Meanwhile, your money sits still, losing value to inflation, not working in your favor. And the most interesting part is that you even know you should be doing something different. You've heard about government bonds, fixed income investments, or maybe even dividends, but still, something holds you back. And most of the time, it's not a lack of information, it's too much insecurity. In practice, this turns into decisions like leaving all your money in a savings account or checking account, or believing that investing is only for people who already have a lot of money, when in reality, today you can start with small amounts. There are simple platforms, accessible content, even ready-made portfolios. But as long as fear dominates, every step feels too risky, even when the biggest risk is doing nothing. And here's an important point. Avoiding investing is also a financial decision, just one that works against you. Because as long as you don't learn how to make money grow, you remain fully dependent on your time and effort. And that completely limits your ability to build wealth consistently over the years. But when you begin to see this clearly, a subtle shift happens. You realize the problem was never investing itself, it was the way it was presented to you. And that raises an even more interesting question. Is there an entire system benefiting from the fact that you don't know how to invest? If you pay close attention, you'll realize that from a very early age, you were exposed to a constant stimulus: consume. Ads, social media, influencers, everything around you seems to push you to buy more, want more, desire more. And the most interesting part is that this doesn't happen aggressively. It happens subtly, almost invisibly. Before you know it, you're comparing your life to others and feeling like you need to keep up. This type of influence directly impacts your financial mindset because you start associating success with appearance, status, and material goods. A better car, a new phone, branded clothes, all of it starts to feel necessary even when it isn't. And here's an important detail. Many of these decisions don't come from real need, but from social pressure disguised as personal choice. In practice, this shows up when you buy something not because you need it, but because everyone else has it, or when you feel the urge to show that you're doing well, even if behind that there's financial imbalance. It's the classic looking rich instead of being rich. And this creates a cycle where you spend to maintain an image while building wealth is always pushed to the background. And the most interesting and maybe uncomfortable part is realizing that this behavior is highly encouraged. The more you consume, the more the system moves. Companies profit, brands grow, the economy flows, but you stay in the same financial place. In other words, there's a silent interest in keeping you as an active consumer, not as someone who builds real wealth. When this realization hits, your perspective shifts completely. You start seeing choices that once felt normal as conditioned patterns. And then an inevitable question arises. If you were trained to consume, why were so few people taught how to actually build wealth? Now comes one of the most uncomfortable truths to face. Almost no one actually taught you how to build wealth. You learned how to work, pay bills, maybe even save, but rarely did someone show you how to multiply money, generate passive income, or think long-term. And this is not a coincidence. The type of knowledge that truly changes the financial game is rarely widespread. If you pay attention, most of the information you receive is superficial. Quick tips, easy promises, shortcuts that sound too good to be true. But strategic knowledge, the kind that involves consistent investing, asset building, and financial intelligence, requires depth. And for some reason, that kind of content is not what spreads the most. It demands effort, and not everyone is willing to seek it. In practice, this creates a silent inequality. While most people focus on earning and spending, a minority focuses on investing and building assets. People who understand concepts like compound interest, diversification, and passive income start playing a completely different game. They don't rely only on salary, they make money work for them with strategy and patience. And here's something important. Today, access to information exists. You can learn about bonds, ETFs, real estate funds, stocks. You can study books, channels, courses. But the point isn't just access, it's intention. Because until you decide to truly learn, you remain stuck at the basics, repeating patterns that don't lead to wealth building. And when you begin to realize this, a shift happens. You understand it wasn't a lack of opportunity, it was a lack of direction. And that leads to an even deeper reflection. If you keep making the same decisions you've always made based on what you've always been taught, what kind of result can you expect in the long run? There's an idea that many people underestimate. It's not the big decisions that define your financial life, it's the small ones, repeated every single day. That choice between spending or investing, consuming or saving, thinking about now or the long term. Individually, they seem irrelevant, but over time, they compound, and that's when the game completely changes. Think about it simply. If every month you directed part of your money into investments like government bonds, fixed income assets, or real estate funds, even if it was a small amount, the effect of compound interest would start working in your favor. Now, imagine the opposite. Small recurring expenses, forgotten subscriptions, impulsive purchases. In the short term, they barely make a difference, but in the long term, the impact is massive. In practice, this explains why two people with similar incomes end up in completely different situations over the years. One starts building assets, generating passive income, gaining financial freedom. The other stays stuck in the cycle of working and spending. And it's not about luck, it's about consistency. Simple decisions repeated so many times that they turn into destiny. And the most interesting part is that this process is invisible at the beginning. You don't see results in the first month or the second. That's why many people give up. But those who understand this game know that financial growth is silent at first and exponential over time. It's like planting a tree. In the beginning, it looks like nothing is happening until suddenly everything changes. And when you realize the power of these small decisions, an inevitable question arises. If your financial life is being built every single day, what exactly have you been repeating so far? Because there's something even deeper happening behind this, something that feeds on these choices.
Here is one of the most subtle and dangerous mechanisms of all. Your financial programming reinforces itself. It works like an automatic cycle. You believe something about money, you make decisions based on that belief, and the results you get end up confirming exactly what you already thought. And just like that, the cycle closes and becomes even stronger. For example, if you believe that money is hard or that there's never enough, your actions tend to follow that pattern. You avoid investing, spend without planning, or simply don't organize yourself. And the result? At the end of the month, there really isn't any money left. Then you think, see, I knew it. But what you call proof is actually the consequence of your own decisions. In practice, this creates a kind of mental trap, because the more you live this cycle, the more real it feels. You start seeing only evidence that confirms your scarcity mindset and ignore any alternative possibilities. It's like using a filter. Everything that passes through it reinforces the same view, and over time, that becomes your reality. And the most interesting part is that this happens without you realizing it. You don't wake up thinking, today I'm going to sabotage myself financially. On the contrary, you believe you're doing the best you can with what you have. But as long as your beliefs don't change, your behaviors stay the same, and so do your results. It's a silent, repetitive, and extremely limiting pattern. But when you begin to see this cycle clearly, something shifts. You realize that maybe the problem was never money itself, but the pattern you've been repeating for years. And that opens the door to the most important question of all. What if it were possible to break this programming? Where would you even begin?
At some point, if you truly want to change your financial life, you'll have to do something that very few people have the courage to do. Question what you've always believed about money. Not accept it automatically, not repeat it on autopilot, but stop and honestly ask, is this actually true, or is it just something I was taught? That simple question alone starts to break patterns that have been rooted for years. Because think about it. How many ideas do you carry today that were never really tested? Money is hard, rich people are greedy, investing is too risky. Have you ever actually investigated these, or did you just accept them as absolute truths? When you start studying financial education, hearing new perspectives, and observing people who have truly built wealth, you realize that many of these beliefs simply don't hold up. In practice, this means replacing assumptions with knowledge. Instead of avoiding investments out of fear, you can start by understanding the basics. What bonds are, how fixed income investments work, what real estate funds are, how companies generate profit in the stock market. Little by little, the unknown stops being intimidating and starts becoming a real opportunity for financial growth. And here's the key point. Every transformation starts with awareness. As long as you don't question, you repeat. But when you start doubting your own beliefs, you open space to build a new financial mindset, one aligned with freedom, growth, and intelligence. And that completely changes how you see money. But realizing this is only the first step, because understanding alone doesn't transform anything. What truly changes the game is what you repeatedly do after that awareness. And that's where the next piece comes in, maybe the most practical of all. After you begin to question your beliefs, a bigger challenge appears, creating new patterns. Because it's not enough to understand the game, you need to play it differently. And that starts with small decisions in your daily life. This is where your financial mindset leaves theory and enters practice, shaping new behaviors that over time will build your financial freedom. One of the most powerful and ignored principles is simple: invest before you spend. Instead of waiting to have money left at the end of the month, which almost never happens, you define a percentage and direct it to investments first. It can be 10%, 20%, or whatever is possible at the moment. Putting it into bonds, fixed income assets, real estate funds, or even solid stocks already starts creating a new cycle where money begins to work for you. In practice, this requires consistency, not perfection. You don't need to get everything right or invest large amounts at the beginning. What matters is repeating the behavior. For example, automating monthly contributions, studying a bit about financial education every day, avoiding impulsive decisions, and always thinking long-term. Small actions done consistently completely change your relationship with money. And here comes an important shift. You stop living just to pay bills and start building assets. You begin to see money as a tool, not as an emotional reward. And little by little, the idea of passive income, financial growth, and independence stops being something distant and starts becoming part of your reality. But all of this only happens when you consciously decide to step out of autopilot. Because in the end, the difference between those who stay stuck and those who build wealth isn't luck. It's the patterns they choose to repeat every single day. And now that you've seen this, it becomes hard to ignore it. Now let me ask you honestly, how many of these things did you realize are already part of your life without you even noticing? How many decisions have you made on autopilot, believing you were doing your best, when in reality, you were just repeating a pattern? This isn't about blame, it's about awareness, because once you see the game, you can't unsee it. The real turning point happens when you decide to stop operating on autopilot and truly take control of your financial life. It doesn't matter if you're starting from zero today or if you've tried before and failed. What matters is this: will you keep repeating the same patterns, or will you start building new ones, even if slowly and simply? Because in the end, the question isn't whether change is possible. The question is, how long will you accept living below your financial potential? How long will you keep postponing decisions that could completely change your future? And more importantly, what will happen if you keep living exactly the way you are today for the next 5 or 10 years? If this kind of content made sense to you, then do this: subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here you won't find empty promises. You'll learn how to build a strong financial mindset, create real wealth, and most importantly, stop playing a game that was never designed for you to win.